Did you know that during the Second World War, the American government produced over 200,000 different propaganda posters? Think about that number. That's more posters than there were soldiers in the initial D-Day landing. Most of us saw the same few in our history books. Rosie the Riveter flexing her muscle. Uncle Sam pointing his finger. A sinking ship with the warning, loose lips sink ships. They're famous for a reason. They worked. But what about the others? The strange ones? The ones that didn't show soldiers or tanks? The ones that targeted farmers or railroad workers or even children? These posters tell a different story of the war. Not a story of battles, but of the immense hidden pressures on everyday life. They were designed to create fear, guilt, and a sense of constant nagging duty. They asked people to save kitchen grease, to stop taking vacations, to look at their neighbors with suspicion. Why did governments feel the need to micromanage the lives of their citizens so intensely? What silent wars were being fought in kitchens and backyards, far from the front lines? These forgotten images open a window into a world of paranoia and sacrifice we rarely talk about. They show us that the war was fought not just with bullets, but with psychology. And maybe, just maybe, that psychological war never really ended. Number 25, could your kitchen scraps really build a bomber? You're standing in a British kitchen in 1943. The room is cold. You see a poster on the wall. It's not flashy. It shows a woman handing a bucket of bones to a man. Simple enough. But behind them, ghostly and transparent, is the shape of a massive bomber plane. The text reads, "Bones are needed for aircraft, glue, and fertilizer. It connects a mundane chore to a powerful weapon." Your leftover chopped bones could, in some strange way, become part of a warplane. This poster was part of the British Ministry of Supply's vast salvage campaign. By 1942, the country was feeling the squeeze of blockades. Raw materials were desperately scarce. Everything had to be reused. The government set up a massive nationwide collection system. People were told to save not just metal and paper, but rags, rubber, and even bones. The local councils appointed official bone men who would go door to door. The bones were then sent to factories to be processed. They were boiled down to create glue for woodworking, particularly for aircraft, like the Mosquito, which had a wooden frame. The fat was extracted to make glycerine, a key component in explosives. The remaining material was ground into fertilizer to help with the Dig for Victory campaign, which encouraged people to grow their own food. The campaign was managed with incredible detail. Lord Beaverbrook, the Minister of Aircraft Production, was known for his relentless drive. He understood that production was everything, but the message had to be simple. People wouldn't save bones if they didn't understand why. So the propaganda had to draw a direct emotional line from the kitchen bin to the sky over enemy territory. The poster does this perfectly. The housewife isn't just cleaning up. She's an active participant in the war effort. Her small act has huge consequences. The campaign was surprisingly effective. In 1943 alone, Britain collected over 100,000 tons of bones. This psychological link was the key. It wasn't just about the material. It was about morale. It made millions of people feel that they were personally contributing, that their daily sacrifices mattered. It turned the home into a battlefield of its own, where waste was the enemy. But how much of a difference did it really make? Was the glycerine from household bones a critical part of the munition supply, or was it a drop in the ocean? Did the government exaggerate the importance of bone salvage just to make people feel involved and keep morale high? And what happened to the artists who created these simple, powerful images? Were their contributions ever officially recognized, or did they remain anonymous civil servants in a much larger machine? Number 24, was your grandfather a spy without knowing it? Imagine a quiet bar in Halifax, Canada, during the war. A soldier is talking to a young woman. He's trying to impress her. He mentions his ship, when it's leaving, where it might be going. He doesn't notice the man in the shadows behind them, listening to every word. This scene is captured in a Canadian propaganda poster. The message is simple. Keep it under your hat. Careless talk costs lives. The artwork is less dramatic than many American posters. It's more subtle. It's about a quiet, creeping danger. This poster highlights a specific Canadian anxiety. Canada was a vital link in the Allied war effort. Its ports, especially Halifax on the East Coast, were the assembly points for the massive convoys that carried supplies and soldiers to Europe. A single piece of information, a ship's name, a departure date, could be disastrous if it fell into the wrong hands. The Canadian government, through agencies like the Bureau of Public Information, launched extensive campaigns to promote secrecy. They knew the enemy wasn't just on the battlefield, they were potentially everywhere, listening in cafes, on buses, at social gatherings. The psychologist Harold Lasswell, in his 1927 book Propaganda Technique in the World War, outlined how governments could manipulate public emotions. He argued that to mobilize a nation, you had to create a powerful enemy to be feared. These careless talk posters did something slightly different. They turned the focus inward. The enemy wasn't just a soldier in a foreign uniform. The enemy could be your own carelessness, your own ego, your desire to show off. This made every citizen a potential security risk. It fostered a low-level paranoia that was useful for the state. People started watching what they said. They might have even started watching what their neighbor said. The campaign was a form of social control wrapped in the language of patriotism. William Stevenson, the famous Canadian spy master codenamed Intrepid, ran vast intelligence operations. But the work of preventing leaks at home was just as important. It was a silent, unglamorous part of the war. These posters were everywhere, in post offices, factories, and bars. They were aimed at soldiers on leave and the civilians they interacted with. They turned casual conversation into a high-stakes game. But did they actually work? How many security breaches were really prevented by these posters as opposed to active counterintelligence work? And what was the long-term psychological effect of telling an entire population that their words could be weapons, that a simple mistake could lead to the deaths of their loved ones? Did it make people more distrustful of each other, and did that distrust linger after the war was over? Number 23. Did a delayed train cost more than just time? Look at this American poster from 1943. It shows two trains on parallel tracks. One is a passenger train filled with civilians in hats and suits. They look relaxed, maybe heading on vacation. The other train is a flat car carrying a massive tank. A soldier stands guard next to it. The text is stark. Is your trip necessary? It's not a request, it's an accusation. It frames personal travel as a selfish indulgence that could be holding up the war effort. This poster was produced for the U.S. Office of Defense Transportation ODT. When America entered the war, its transportation system was put under unimaginable strain. The country's vast network of railroads became the arteries of the war machine. They had to move millions of soldiers to training camps and ports. They had to move mountains of steel, oil, and food to factories and shipyards. According to the Association of American Railroads, freight traffic on U.S. railroads more than doubled between 1940 and 1944. There simply wasn't enough capacity for both military and civilian needs. Joseph B. Eastman, the director of the ODT, had a serious problem. He couldn't just ban civilian travel. It was a free country, after all. So he had to persuade people to police themselves. The "Is Your Trip Necessary" campaign was a masterpiece of guilt-based propaganda. It didn't forbid you from traveling. It just made you feel terrible about it. The poster's imagery is clever. It creates a direct visual conflict between civilian comfort and military necessity. The relaxed passengers versus the grim, waiting soldier, the vacation versus the war. It forces the viewer to choose a side. Are you with the soldier? Or are you part of the problem? The campaign also used radio spots and magazine ads. It was a constant low-level hum of messaging designed to make people think twice before buying a ticket. The government wanted people to stay home. They wanted the tracks clear for tanks, not tourists. The campaign was a success in reducing non-essential travel. But it also reveals the tension between individual freedom and collective responsibility during a crisis. The government was using psychological tools to manage public behavior on a massive scale. It was a form of soft coercion. What are the ethical lines when it comes to using guilt as a public policy tool? Did the ODT ever study the economic impact of this campaign on the tourism and hospitality industries? And what about the railroad workers themselves? They were declared essential personnel, working grueling hours under immense pressure, yet they didn't have the status of soldiers. How did they cope with being the unseen, uncelebrated engine of the war? Number 22, could a garden hose really defeat an air force? Here is a British poster. It's not about fighting, it's about fire. It shows a simple stylized drawing of a house with its roof on fire. In the foreground, a man is using a stirrup pump, a small, hand-operated water pump, to spray a jet of water at the flames. The text says, "Join a firebomb fighting party." It's a call to action, but a very specific, very local one. It's about defending your own street, her own home, with the most basic of tools. This poster addresses a very real threat during the Blitz, which began in September 1940. Enemy bombers would drop a mix of high explosive bombs and thousands of small incendiary bombs. The incendiaries were designed to start fires. A single raid could start hundreds, even thousands of fires simultaneously, overwhelming the professional fire brigades. The government realized that the only way to combat this was to mobilize the civilian population. This led to the creation of the Air Raid Precautions ARP service, and later, the Fire Guard. These were volunteer organizations, your neighbors, your local shopkeeper. The idea was that every street should have its own team of fire watchers and firefighters. The stirrup pump was their main weapon. It was a simple, cheap device. One person would pump the handle up and down while another aimed the nozzle. They required a team of 2 or 3 people and a bucket of water. The poster is a piece of instructional propaganda. It's telling you what to do. It's giving you a specific, tangible action you can take to fight back. This was psychologically important. It combated the feeling of helplessness that people must have felt huddled in their shelters listening to the bombs fall. It gave them a sense of agency. The writer and social commentator J.B. Priestley wrote extensively about the Blitz spirit, this sense of communal effort and resilience. The fire parties were a perfect example of it. They were a grassroots defense network. The Fire Guard was not an optional activity. By 1941, the government made service compulsory for men of a certain age, and later for women too. You had to do your duty. This poster, while framed as an invitation, join a party, was part of a much larger system of mandatory civil defense. It was about organizing society to withstand a new kind of warfare, one where the front line was in every city block. But how effective were these volunteer parties really? Did their efforts significantly reduce the damage from firebombing raids, or was their main contribution to public morale? We have statistics on the number of bombs dropped, but how much data exists on the number of fires successfully extinguished by civilians with stirrup pumps? And what were the social dynamics within these local groups? How did neighbors forced into life or death situations together navigate their existing relationships and conflicts? Number 21, were women told they were only temporary men? We've all seen Rosie the Riveter, a strong, confident woman flexing her bicep. The message is about empowerment. But here's a different American poster. It shows a woman in factory overalls working on a piece of machinery. In the background, in silhouette, is a soldier with a rifle. The text reads, "The girl he left behind is still behind him. She's a WOW." WOW stands for Woman Ordnance Worker. The poster is praising her, but it's also defining her. Her identity is tied to the soldier. She is the girl he left behind. Her work is important because it supports him. This poster reveals a more complex and perhaps more honest picture of the role of women in the war industry. While the government desperately needed women to fill the labor shortage left by men going off to fight, there was a deep-seated social anxiety about this change. What would happen to traditional gender roles? What would happen to the family? Propaganda had to walk a very fine line. It had to encourage women to take on men's work, but it also had to reassure society that this was a temporary situation. The war would end, the men would come back, and women would return to their homes. The WOW campaign was a real initiative by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. It was designed to recruit women for work in munitions factories. They even had a special uniform and an awards ceremony. It was a way of giving these women a sense of identity and importance, but look closely at the language. She's behind him. Her role is supportive, not primary. This contrasts with the more direct, self-possessed image of Rosie the Riveter. This poster is part of a body of propaganda that framed women's war work as an extension of their domestic roles. Instead of caring for a family, they were caring for the nation. They were keeping the home front running so the men could win the war. The historian Layla J. Rupp, in her book Mobilizing Women for War, argues that this framing was crucial. It made the radical shift in the labor force feel less threatening to the social order. After the war, this temporary mindset became a problem. Millions of women had discovered a new sense of independence and purpose, but the propaganda and the society it reflected expected them to give up their jobs when the men returned. Many were fired to make way for returning veterans. This poster seen today is a snapshot of that contradiction. It celebrates female strength, but within a very traditional male-dominated framework. How did the women who worked in these factories feel about this kind of messaging? Did they see themselves as temporary workers, or did they feel they had earned a permanent place in the workforce? And how much did the post-war pressure to return to domesticity contribute to the feminist movements that emerged a decade or two later? Number 20, did the government want you to fear your food? This poster is stark and a little disturbing. It's from the United States. It shows a human-like figure, but its body is a grotesque mashup of kitchen waste. An orange peel for a head, a cabbage leaf for a torso, a banana peel for an arm. This Wasta man is marching alongside soldiers from the opposing forces. The text is blunt. Wast helps the enemy. Conserve material. The message is clear. Wasting food isn't just inefficient. It's an act of treason. You are actively helping the other side. This is an example of fear and shame-based propaganda. It was part of the American government's massive conservation campaigns during the war. The U.S. was the arsenal of democracy, but it was also the breadbasket. It had to feed its own population, its massive army, and its allies in Britain and the Soviet Union. Every scrap of food was precious. The War Food Administration, established in 1943, oversaw a complex system of rationing for things like sugar, meat, and coffee. But rationing wasn't enough. The government needed to change people's habits. They had to convince 130 million Americans to stop wasting food. This poster is aggressive. It doesn't ask you politely. It personifies waste as an evil, monstrous ally of the enemy. It taps into a deep psychological fear of the other and links it to a common household activity. Every time you throw away leftovers, the poster suggests you are giving aid and comfort to the forces of darkness. This kind of message was powerful. It turned the kitchen into a moral battleground. It made people conscious of their consumption in a way they'd never been before. The campaigns urged people to join the U.S. Clean Plate Club and to follow the motto, "Food is a weapon. Don't waste it." The artist of this particular poster, a man named C.R. Miller, was part of a huge pool of talent working for the Office of War Information, OWI. The OWI was the central hub for American propaganda, and they experimented with a wide range of styles and messages, from the folksy and patriotic to the dark and threatening. But what was the psychological cost of this kind of messaging? Did making people feel guilty about every scrap of food create a background level of anxiety that affected their daily lives? How did the government measure the success of these anti-waste campaigns? Was there a noticeable drop in household food waste, or was it impossible to track? And did these habits of conservation stick with people after the war, or did the consumer culture of the 1950s erase them completely? Number 19, could you be jailed for a rumor? Here is a poster that feels different. It's mostly text. It looks like a legal notice. It's an American poster, and it shows a man behind bars. The headline screams, "A rumor is a bullet that you fire from your own lips." Below, in smaller text, it says, "Rumor mongers are agents of the enemy. Report them to the FBI." This wasn't about careless talk leaking secrets. This was about spreading rumors, spreading gossip, spreading any information that could damage morale or create division. This poster reveals a darker side of the home front information war. The government wasn't just worried about military secrets. It was worried about public opinion. In a country as diverse as the United States, there was a constant fear that the enemy could exploit social and racial tensions. Rumors were seen as a form of psychological warfare. A rumor that a certain company was making defective weapons could hurt production. A rumor that a certain ethnic group was not supporting the war could lead to social unrest. The Office of War Information, OWI, was deeply concerned about this. They tracked rumors across the country, they tried to debunk them with radio programs and news articles, but they also used threats. This poster is a direct threat. It equates spreading a rumor with firing a gun. It labels rumor mongers as enemy agents, and it tells you to report them to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is a significant escalation. It's asking citizens to inform on each other. It's encouraging a culture of suspicion. The legal basis for this was shaky. The Espionage Act of 1917 could be used to prosecute people who interfered with the war effort, but simply repeating a rumor was a gray area. The real power of the poster was not legal, but psychological. It was designed to make people afraid to speak critically or to repeat any information that wasn't from an official source. It was an attempt to control the national conversation. The social psychologist Gordon Allport, in his 1947 book, The Psychology of Rumor, studied how and why rumors spread, particularly in times of anxiety and uncertainty. The war was the perfect breeding ground for them. The government was trying to sterilize this environment. This type of propaganda raises difficult questions about freedom of speech during a national crisis. Where is the line between preventing panic and suppressing dissent? How many people were actually investigated by the FBI for spreading rumors? We know the FBI was engaged in widespread surveillance during this period, but how much of it was focused on ordinary people's conversations? And did this campaign actually stop rumors, or did it just drive them underground, making them even more powerful and harder to counteract? Number 18 was Your Doctor More Dangerous Than the Enemy. This is an unusual Australian poster. It doesn't show a soldier or a factory. It shows a mother holding a sick child. The mother looks worried. The text is a warning. Don't call the doctor for trifles. Let him serve the services. It's a message about healthcare rationing. It's telling you to think twice before seeking medical help. Your minor illness could be taking a doctor away from a wounded soldier. During the war, Australia committed a huge proportion of its population to the armed forces. This included a large number of doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. The result was a severe shortage of medical personnel on the home front. The government had to manage this resource carefully. They couldn't just build new medical schools overnight. They had to reduce civilian demand for healthcare. This poster is part of that effort. It's a public health message, but it's delivered with the moral weight of the war effort behind it. The psychology here is again based on guilt. It frames a personal health concern as a potentially selfish act. It puts the citizen in a difficult position. Is my child's fever a trifle, or is it serious? The poster offers no guidance. It just creates a sense of obligation. The needs of the military come first. This was part of a broader campaign in many allied countries. In Britain, people were encouraged to use the Ministry of Health's medicine chest and to rely on home remedies for common ailments. It was about creating a more self-reliant population that wouldn't strain the professional medical system. The Australian Department of Health promoted similar ideas. This was a war of total mobilization, and that meant mobilizing public health attitudes as well. The poster also reflects the immense respect and authority that doctors held at the time. The doctor is portrayed as a vital national asset, a resource to be conserved like rubber or gasoline. But it also places a heavy burden on individuals, particularly mothers, to make their own medical judgments. What were the public health consequences of this campaign? How many serious illnesses were left untreated because people were afraid of being seen as unpatriotic for bothering a doctor? Are there any public health records from the time that show change in the rates of hospitalization for common illnesses? And how did the remaining civilian doctors cope with the pressure of being the gatekeepers of this scarce resource? Number 17, did they tell children that pests were traitors? This poster is from the Soviet Union. The art style is bold and graphic. It shows three figures: a rat, a weevil, and a sparrow. They are drawn to look sinister and greedy. They are eating from a large sack of grain. In the background, a red star shines. The Russian text translates to something like the mouse, the weevil, and the sparrow are our enemies. They steal our grain. The message is aimed at children. It's telling them that common pests are enemies of the state. The war on the Eastern Front was a conflict of unimaginable scale and brutality. For the Soviet Union, the struggle was existential. The entire society was mobilized. This included children. The state ideology held that everyone, regardless of age, had a role to play. This poster is part of that total mobilization. The battle for grain was just as important as the battles at the front. The German invasion had overrun much of the Soviet Union's best agricultural land. The country was facing starvation. Every single grain of wheat was precious. It was needed to feed the Red Army and the workers in the factories. This poster does something remarkable. It takes a complex geopolitical conflict and simplifies it into a story that a child can understand. It personifies the enemy not as a foreign soldier, but as a familiar pest. The rat is a thief. The sparrow is a parasite. This is a powerful form of indoctrination. It teaches children to see the world in terms of us versus them, of patriots versus enemies. It encourages them to participate in the war effort by, for example, scaring away birds from the fields or helping to control rodents. It connects their playtime activities to the great national struggle. The Soviet youth organization, the Pioneers, was often mobilized for agricultural work and pest control campaigns. This poster would have been a familiar sight in schools and collective farms. It was designed by the Kukriniksi, a famous trio of Soviet artists known for their sharp, satirical cartoons and propaganda posters. This is a form of psychological conditioning. It blurs the line between the natural world and the political world. It teaches children to see ideological enemies everywhere, even in their own backyard. What was the long-term effect of this kind of propaganda on the generation of children who grew up with it? Did it create a mindset of constant vigilance and suspicion that carried over into their adult lives? We know about the large-scale battles for production, but how much do we really know about the small-scale, child-led battles against pests on collective farms? Was their contribution economically significant, or was the real goal the shaping of their young minds? Number 16, were you supposed to pick up a soldier on the road? Here's an American poster that presents a real dilemma. It shows a soldier burdened with a heavy pack, thumbing for a ride on the side of a highway. A civilian car drives past him without stopping. The text asks, "Going my way. When you ride alone, you ride with the enemy." The message is that you should pick up hitchhikers, specifically soldiers. And if you don't, you are somehow helping the opposition by wasting gasoline. This poster is fascinating because it seems to contradict other wartime messages. People were being told to be careful about what they said, to be suspicious of strangers, and to conserve resources. But this poster is telling them to open their car doors to unknown men in uniform. It was part of the Share the Ride campaign, heavily promoted by the Office of Defense Transportation. The goal was to conserve rubber and gasoline, which were severely rationed. Private cars were seen as inefficient if they were only carrying one person. The government wanted to turn every car into a small-scale public transport vehicle. The psychology is a mix of patriotism and peer pressure. The image of the tired soldier is designed to evoke sympathy and a sense of duty. He is doing his part, you should do yours. The phrase, "you ride with the enemy," is a powerful piece of negative framing. It equates an empty passenger seat with treason. It was a slogan created by the advertising executive Leo Burnett. It was so effective that it became a national catchphrase. The campaign encouraged the formation of carpools for commuting to work. Factories would help organize ride-sharing plans for their employees. But it also extended to picking up soldiers on leave who often had to travel long distances to and from their bases. This created a strange social situation. The government was actively encouraging a practice that, in other circumstances, might be considered risky. It was a calculated risk. The need to conserve fuel and rubber was deemed more important than the potential dangers of picking up strangers. It shows how the priorities of the state can reshape social norms. How many people actually participated in these informal ride-sharing schemes? The FBI, which was busy tracking rumors, must have had concerns about the security implications of this campaign. Were there any documented cases of enemy agents using this system to travel or gather intelligence? And how did the campaign affect public perceptions of trust and safety, both during and after the war? Number 15, did your government try to sell you a new diet? This is a British poster. It's cheerful and colorful. It features a cartoon character called Dr. Carrot. He's a friendly-looking carrot with a top hat and a monocle. He's pointing to a family at a dinner table, and the text says, "The vitamin policeman will get you if you don't eat your carrots." It's a playful message, but behind it is a serious government policy. It's an attempt to fundamentally change the nation's eating habits. During the war, Britain was heavily dependent on imported food. The naval blockades made this supply line precarious and expensive. The Ministry of Food, under the leadership of Lord Woolton, had to devise a plan to feed the nation using mostly homegrown produce. This led to a system of rationing for imported goods like sugar, meat, and bananas. But it also led to a massive promotional campaign for foods that could be grown easily in Britain, like potatoes, cabbages, and, most famously, carrots. The government had to convince people to eat these things. They had to make a diet of vegetables seem appealing. The Dr. Carrot and Potato Pete characters were part of a sophisticated marketing campaign. It was public health propaganda. The Ministry of Food employed nutrition experts like Sir Jack Drummond to devise a diet that would keep the population healthy on the available rations. They discovered that carrots were a great source of vitamin A, so they launched a campaign to promote them. They pushed the idea that eating carrots would help you see in the dark. This was a clever piece of misinformation. While vitamin A is important for vision, it doesn't give you night vision. The story was likely spread to explain the success of British pilots who were using a new secret radar technology to find enemy bombers at night. By attributing their success to carrots, they distracted from the real technological advantage. The campaign was incredibly successful. People started eating carrots in all sorts of new ways. The ministry published recipes for carrot fudge, carrot jam, and a drink called Carolade. Consumption of carrots skyrocketed. This poster is a great example of how propaganda can be soft. It's not threatening or scary. It's charming and persuasive. It uses a cartoon character and a gentle joke to sell a major change in public behavior. It shows that propaganda isn't always about hate. Sometimes it's about carrots. But to what extent was the British wartime diet, engineered by the Ministry of Food, responsible for the documented improvements in public health during that period? Was it the increased vegetable consumption or the reduction in sugar and fat? And how much did the carrots help you see in the dark myth become ingrained in popular culture long after its original purpose was forgotten? Number 14, were you told that your job was a battlefield? Look at this stark graphic American poster. It shows the gloved hands of a factory worker holding a wrench. The hands are gripping the wrench so tightly that the knuckles are white. Behind the wrench, there is the shadow of a bayonet. The text is simple and powerful. This is my fighting iron. The poster equates the worker's tool with a soldier's weapon. It frames the factory floor as a front line in the war. This poster speaks to the immense challenge of industrial mobilization. The United States had to transform its economy from producing consumer goods to producing an overwhelming quantity of war materials. This required millions of workers, many of whom had never seen the inside of a factory before. The government and industry leaders needed to motivate this new workforce. They needed to make them feel that their work was as important as the work of the soldiers they were supplying. The War Production Board, established in 1942, oversaw this massive effort. By 1944, American factories were producing a new plane every 5 minutes and a new ship every day. The psychology of this poster is about identity and purpose. It tells the worker they are not just a cog in a machine. They are a warrior, their wrench is a weapon, their labor is combat. This was a common theme in home front propaganda. Posters often depicted factory workers standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, blurring the lines between the two roles. And slogans like, "The man at the lathe is the man with the gun" were popular. This was crucial for morale. Factory work was often dangerous, repetitive, and exhausting. By giving it a patriotic, heroic meaning, the government could encourage productivity and discourage things like absenteeism or strikes. This framing of industrial labor as combat also served another purpose. It helped to justify the government's increased control over the economy and the workforce. During the war, the National War Labor Board had the power to settle labor disputes, and in some cases, to prevent strikes that could disrupt production. If your job was a battlefield, then going on strike was not just a labor dispute, it was akin to desertion. This propaganda, therefore, was not just about motivation, it was also about control. What was the real relationship between labor unions and the government during the war? Did this worker, as soldier rhetoric, empower workers, or did it subordinate their interests to the demands of the state? And how did workers themselves feel about this comparison? Did they truly see their fighting irons as equivalent to the rifles being carried by their sons and brothers overseas? Number 13, could a book really be a weapon? This is a very different kind of poster. It's from the American Library Association. It shows a powerful symbolic image, a book being pierced by a bayonet. The book is titled The Nazarene. The shadow cast by the weapon in the book forms the shape of a swastika. The text is chilling. Books are weapons in the war of ideas. It's not about producing more tanks or saving more scrap. It's about an intellectual, ideological battle. This poster was part of the Victory Book Campaign, a joint effort by the American Library Association, the Red Cross, and other groups. The campaign, which ran from 1942 to 1943, aimed to collect books from the public to be sent to soldiers at home and abroad. The goal was to provide reading material for troops, to keep up their morale and give them a connection to home. They collected millions of books. But this poster goes beyond just providing entertainment. It argues that books themselves are a form of ammunition in a larger struggle over values. The poster is a direct response to the book burnings that had taken place in Germany in the 1930s. The image of the bayonet stabbing a book is a powerful condemnation of the anti-intellectualism and censorship of authoritarian regimes. It positions the United States and its allies as the defenders of knowledge, freedom of thought, and culture. The choice of the book title, The Nazarene by Sholem Asch, a historical novel about the life of Jesus, written by a Jewish author, was a deliberate and pointed statement about religious and cultural tolerance. The message was that this war was not just about territory. It was a fight to defend the very principles of a free and open society. Franklin D. Roosevelt himself spoke about the importance of books, saying, "Books cannot be killed by fire. People die, but books never die." This poster is a reminder that propaganda can also be used to promote complex, abstract ideas. It's not always about simple, direct actions. It can be about reinforcing a nation's core values. It's asking people not to build a tank, but to believe in an idea, the idea that knowledge is power and that freedom of thought is worth fighting for. But how did the soldiers who received these books actually use them? Were they seen primarily as a distraction and a form of entertainment, or did they engage with the war of ideas that this poster describes? And was there any censorship in the selection of books that were sent to soldiers? Did the government try to ensure that the troops were reading the right kinds of books, the ones that would reinforce the desired political and social values? Number 12, did the government think you were a child? Take a look at this British poster. It's designed to look like a children's board game, like Snakes and Ladders. It's called the Squander Bugs Game. The board is a winding path of squares. Some squares show a person doing something wasteful, like buying unnecessary things or leaving the lights on. If you land on one of these squares, a ladder, in this case, a creepy-looking insect, the squander bug takes you backward. Other squares show someone doing something thrifty, like saving money or mending clothes. Like these squares let you jump forward. The goal is to reach the victory square at the end. The squander bug was a famous British propaganda character. He was created by the artist Philip Boydell for the National Savings Committee. The squander bug was a little gremlin-like creature who tempted people to waste money. He would whisper in their ears, telling them to buy frivolous things instead of saving their money or buying war bonds. He was the personification of wasteful spending. The character became incredibly popular. He appeared in cartoons, films, and a whole series of posters. He was a playful, almost friendly-looking villain. This poster is a brilliant piece of psychological design. By framing the choice between saving and spending as a children's game, it simplifies a complex economic message. It makes it easy to understand. Good behavior saving moves you toward victory. Bad behavior squandering helps the enemy personified by the bug and moves you away from victory. It's a form of gamification. It turns a national economic challenge into a personal game that you can win or lose. This was more effective than just printing dry statistics about inflation or the national debt. It engaged people on an emotional, almost childish level. It made saving money feel like a fun, patriotic adventure. Lord McIntosh, the head of the National Savings Committee, understood that you had to make the message simple and repetitive. The squander bug was the perfect vehicle for this. This approach of treating the public like children was surprisingly common in propaganda. It assumes that people respond better to simple narratives and clear-cut choices than to complex arguments. But is this approach respectful of citizens' intelligence? By turning economic policy into a cartoon, does it prevent a more serious public debate about the real costs of the war and how they should be distributed? And what does the popularity of a character like the Squander Bug tell us about the British psyche during the war? Did people appreciate the lighthearted approach, or did it feel condescending? Number 11, was it your patriotic duty to be unhealthy? This American poster is visually jarring. It shows a fat man greedily stuffing his face with food. He has multiple chins and a smug expression. Behind him, a shadow looms. It's the dark, angular shadow of a swastika. The text reads, "Don't be a gourmand. Food is a weapon." The word gourmand, a variation of gourmand, is used to mean a greedy eater, a glutton. The message is not just that wasting food is bad. It's that being overweight, that overconsumption itself is unpatriotic. This poster is part of the same broad conservation campaign as the WASP helps the enemy posters, but its focus is different. It's not about what's in your trash can, it's about what's on your plate, and by extension, what's on your body. It directly links personal body size to the war effort. It suggests that fatness is a sign of selfish, unpatriotic indulgence. This is a very personal and aggressive form of propaganda. It's not just judging your actions, it's judging your appearance. This messaging was part of a larger government effort to manage the nation's food supply. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and the War Food Administration promoted the idea of the basic 7 food groups, a precursor to the modern food pyramid. They encouraged people to eat a balanced, simple diet. But this poster goes beyond nutritional advice. It uses moral shame. The fat man is not just unhealthy, he is portrayed as morally corrupt. He is on the same side as the enemy. This taps into a long history of associating fatness with negative qualities like greed and lack of self-control. During a time of national sacrifice, these qualities were seen as particularly offensive. This type of message would be controversial today, but during the war, it was part of a culture that demanded conformity and shared sacrifice. It's a powerful example of how the state can try to regulate the most personal aspects of life, including what and how much you eat. It turns the human body into a site of political meaning. A lean, fit body becomes a symbol of patriotism and self-discipline, while a fat body becomes a symbol of selfishness and betrayal. What was the social impact of this kind of messaging? Did it lead to an increase in social stigma against overweight people? And how did it interact with the realities of food availability and poverty? Was it fair to shame people for their body size when access to healthy food was not equal for everyone? Number 10, did they recruit spies in a post office? This British poster is incredibly simple and discreet. It's mostly text. It reads, "If you are of British birth and of pure British descent, and if you know a European language and the country in which it is spoken, write to Box 500, Parliament Street Post Office." There are no images, no patriotic slogans. It's a cryptic job advertisement. It's a recruitment poster for spies. This was a real ad used by the Special Operations Executive SOE. The SOE was a secret British organization formed in 1940. Its purpose, in the words of Winston Churchill, was to set Europe ablaze. They were responsible for espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. They needed to recruit people who could blend in behind enemy lines. This meant they needed people who were not just British, but who could pass as natives of France, Belgium, Holland, or other occupied countries. They needed fluent language skills and an intimate knowledge of the local culture. This poster is the opposite of the loud, colorful military recruitment posters. It's quiet and mysterious. It's designed to attract a very specific type of person, someone who is curious, intelligent, and perhaps a little unconventional. The phrase of pure British descent was important. The SOE was worried about double agents, so they initially tried to recruit people with no family ties to the continent, though this rule was often relaxed out of necessity. The process was secretive. People who responded to the ad would be vetted and interviewed in a series of clandestine meetings. Famous SOE agents like Violet Sabo and Odette Hollows were recruited through these kinds of channels. The training was intense. They learned silent killing, sabotage, Morse code, and how to withstand interrogation. This poster is a window into the hidden world of secret warfare. It shows that recruitment wasn't always about appealing to overt patriotism. Sometimes it was about appealing to a sense of adventure and a willingness to operate in the shadows. The SOE's work was incredibly dangerous. The life expectancy of an agent in the field was often measured in months or even weeks. This simple, bureaucratic-looking ad in a post office was a doorway to that perilous world. But how many people responded to these ads? And how did the SOE's recruiters sort through the applications to find the few individuals who had the unique combination of skills and psychological resilience needed for this kind of work? What happened to the people who applied but were rejected? Were they ever told what the job really was? Number 9, could your old lipstick tube sink a ship? Here's an American poster that focuses on a very specific and perhaps surprising item. It shows a woman, elegantly dressed, looking at her reflection in a mirror. She is holding a lipstick tube. The text says, "A soldier's life may depend on your old lipstick tube." Below it explains metal is needed to make ammunition, save your old tubes. It's a message that targets women directly, and it connects a symbol of femininity and beauty to the harsh reality of war. This poster was part of the American salvage effort, similar to the British campaigns to collect bones and scrap metal. The War Production Board coordinated these drives. They knew that every bit of metal counted. A lipstick tube is small. It's made of brass or other metals, but if you could collect millions of them, it would add up. The campaign was a clever piece of psychological targeting. It took an object that was part of a woman's daily routine and invested it with patriotic significance. It told women that even their beauty products could be part of the war effort. The campaign was run with the cooperation of the cosmetics industry. Old companies like Revlon and Tangy encouraged their customers to return their old metal lipstick and rouge containers to the store when they bought a new one. The stores would then pass the collected metal on to the salvage authorities. It was a form of industrial consumer partnership. The poster's message is slightly hyperbolic. It's unlikely that a single lipstick tube was the deciding factor in a soldier's life, but the emotional logic is powerful. It creates a direct link between a small personal act of conservation and the life or death struggles on the battlefield. It was designed to make women feel that their participation mattered, that they were not just passive spectators of the war. This focus on women as consumers was a key part of home front propaganda. Women were seen as the managers of the household economy. They were the ones who did the shopping, the cooking, and the saving. Propaganda had to reach them and persuade them to change their habits. This poster is a perfect example of that strategy. But how successful was this specific campaign? Do we have any records of how many tons of metal were actually collected from old cosmetics containers? And did this campaign have any lasting impact on the cosmetics industry? Did it lead to the use of alternative materials like plastic or cardboard for packaging, which became more common after the war? Number 8 was Your Neighbor a Secret Agent. This poster is dark and paranoid. It's from the United States. It shows a shadowy, sinister-looking hand holding a telephone receiver. The hand is dripping with blood. The telephone cord snakes down and becomes the tail of a rat. In the background, a ship is exploding. The text is a simple, direct question. Someone talked. Did you? It's a classic careless talk poster, but its imagery is particularly gruesome and accusatory. This poster was produced by the printing company Abbott Laboratories as part of a series of posters they created for the war effort. The artist was a man named Albert Dorn. The style is much more graphic and frightening than many of the government-produced posters. It's not just warning you about the consequences of careless talk, it's accusing you. It implies that if you have talked, you have blood on your hands. The rat imagery connects the act of gossip to disease and filth. The exploding ship is the direct, catastrophic result of your words. This type of propaganda was designed to induce a state of high alert and self-censorship. It wanted to make people terrified of saying the wrong thing. It reflects the real fear of espionage and sabotage that existed in the United States, particularly in the early years of the war. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was actively investigating thousands of suspected enemy agents. There were real spy rings, like the Duquesne spy ring, which was broken up in 1941. The government wanted to turn every citizen into a counterintelligence agent, constantly monitoring themselves and others. The problem with this kind of fear-based messaging is that it can have unintended consequences. It can create a climate of suspicion and distrust that corrodes the social fabric. It can lead to false accusations and witch hunts. It encourages people to see their neighbors not as friends, but as potential threats. This poster is a powerful tool for social control. It uses dramatic, emotional imagery to bypass rational thought and create a gut-level fear response. It's a reminder that propaganda often works by appealing to our darkest anxieties. What was the psychological impact of being surrounded by these kinds of threatening images? Did it make people more cohesive and careful, or did it make them more anxious and divided? And how did the government and the public balance the real need for security with the preservation of a free and open society? Number 7. Could mending a sock win the war? This British poster is gentle and domestic. It shows a woman's hands carefully darning a sock. The hands are capable and strong. The image is simple and quiet. The text reads, "Make do and mend." It was the slogan of a major campaign launched by the British Board of Trade in 1943. It was a call for austerity, resourcefulness, and self-reliance. By the mid-war years, Britain was facing severe shortages of clothing and textiles. Raw materials like cotton and wool were needed for uniforms and other military supplies. Factories that once made dresses were now making parachutes. The government introduced a strict clothes rationing system. Every person was given a book of coupons, and every item of clothing had a coupon value. You couldn't just buy a new coat because you wanted one. You had to have enough coupons. The Eke Do and Mend campaign was the other half of this policy. If you couldn't buy new clothes, you had to take care of the ones you had. The campaign was aimed primarily at women. The Board of Trade published pamphlets and held classes teaching people old-fashioned skills like darning, patching, and how to unpick an old woolen sweater and re-knit it into something new. It was about turning old things into new things. It was a celebration of thrift. The poster itself is a great example of this ethos. It's not glamorous. It doesn't promise glory. It shows a simple, mundane, but essential task. It elevates the act of mending to a patriotic duty. It tells women that their skills in the home are a vital part of the national war effort. This was empowering. It gave value to unpaid domestic labor. The writer Nella Last, in her famous wartime diary, wrote extensively about her own make do and mend efforts, seeing them as her personal contribution to the fight. This campaign was about more than just saving material. It was about building a culture of resilience. It was about teaching a generation of people how to be resourceful and to find satisfaction not in consumption but in conservation. It was a form of propaganda that encouraged practical skills and a mindset of self-sufficiency. But what was the economic impact of this? Did the campaign significantly reduce the demand for new textiles, freeing up resources for the military? And what happened to these skills after the war? Did the make, do, and mend ethos survive into the more affluent 1950s, or was it quickly replaced by a new culture of disposable consumer goods? Number 6, was it your fault if a soldier died? This American poster is one of the most direct and brutal in its use of guilt. It shows a gold star hanging in a window. A gold star signified that a family had lost a son in the war. Behind the star, you can see the sad, silhouetted figures of the soldier's parents. The text is a direct accusation aimed at a factory worker. He died because you were careless. It draws a straight, unforgiving line from a worker's mistake on the factory floor to a soldier's death on the battlefield. This poster was likely displayed inside a factory as part of an industrial safety campaign. Workplace accidents were a serious problem during the war. Factories were running 24/7. They were filled with new, inexperienced workers, including many women. The pressure to produce was immense. In this environment, mistakes and accidents happened. An improperly inspected shell could fail to explode. A faulty rivet on an airplane wing could lead to a catastrophic failure. The government and factory owners needed to reduce these errors. They needed to instill a sense of extreme diligence and responsibility in the workforce. This poster uses the most powerful emotional weapon it can find: the death of a soldier. It's not just a warning, it's a judgment. It tells the worker that their carelessness is not just a safety violation, it's a moral failure that has resulted in the ultimate tragedy. It aims to create a paralyzing sense of personal responsibility. The goal was to make every worker feel that the life of a soldier was literally in their hands. This is an extreme form of psychological manipulation. It takes the abstract idea of supporting the troops and makes it terrifyingly concrete. The National Safety Council worked with the War Production Board to promote these kinds of messages. They understood that fear and guilt were powerful motivators, but what was it like to work under the shadow of this kind of message every day? Did it actually improve safety and quality control, or did it just create a climate of fear and anxiety that could lead to even more mistakes? We have data on industrial accident rates during the war, but how do we measure the psychological toll that this kind of propaganda took on the millions of men and women who were working on the home front? And how did the families who had actually lost sons feel about their personal tragedy being used in this way as a tool to motivate factory workers? Number 5, did they want you to see the enemy in the dark? This is a British poster. It's very dark and atmospheric. It shows a man in a trench coat, his face hidden in shadow, lighting a cigarette. The small flame from his match brightly illuminates his face, making him a clear target in the darkness. The text is a simple command: don't be a target. Put that light OUT. This poster is about the blackout. The blackout was one of the most profound and pervasive experiences of life on the British home front. Starting in September 1939, strict regulations required that no light be visible from any building after dark. Streetlights were turned off, car headlights had to be covered with special masks, people had to fit their homes with thick black curtains. The idea was to prevent enemy bombers from being able to see their targets at night. It plunged the entire country into an unnatural, inky blackness. This poster is a piece of public safety instruction, but it's also a fear-based warning. The man in the picture is not just being careless, he is making himself a target. The poster personalizes the danger. The bomber pilot high above is not just dropping bombs on a city, he is looking for you, specifically for your tiny light. This was the job of the ARP wardens. They would patrol the streets at night, and if they saw a chink of light from a window, they would shout, "Put that light out." This poster reinforces their authority. It turns every citizen into their own warden. It encourages a state of constant vigilance. The writer George Orwell, in his diaries, described the strange, disorienting world of the blackout, a world of unseen obstacles and muffled sounds. The blackout had a huge impact on daily life. It led to a sharp increase in traffic accidents. People fell into canals. Crime rates changed. But it also fostered a strange kind of intimacy and community as people learned to navigate their darkened world together. This poster is a reminder that the war was not just a series of distant battles, it was a sensory experience that transformed the familiar landscape of home. But how effective was the blackout, really? Military historians still debate how much it actually hindered enemy bombing raids, especially after navigational technology improved. Was the primary effect of the blackout tactical, or was it psychological? Did it do more to boost civilian morale and a sense of shared sacrifice than it did to protect the cities from bombs? Number 4, were farmers the new soldiers? This American poster has a heroic, almost monumental feel. It shows a farmer, strong and determined, standing in his field. He is holding a pitchfork, but he is not alone. Marching behind him in perfect formation are the ghostly figures of soldiers. The farmer and the soldiers are moving forward together. The text declares, "Farmers are fighting men too." It's a direct comparison between the man in the field and the man on the battlefield. This poster was part of the Food for Freedom campaign. The U.S. Department of Agriculture understood that the war would be won not just with guns, but with food. The American agriculture had to feed the nation, the armed forces, and a significant portion of the Allied world. This was a monumental task. But farmers were, facing a severe labor shortage. Many of their sons and hired hands had gone off to enlist. They were being asked to produce more food than ever before, but with fewer people. The purpose of this poster was to boost the morale of farmers and to elevate their status in the eyes of the nation. It tells the farmer that his work is not a civilian job. It is a form of combat. His pitchfork is like a rifle. His field is a battlefield. This was important because farmers were in a reserved occupation. They were generally not drafted because their work was considered too important. This could sometimes lead to a feeling of guilt or a sense of being left out of the main struggle. This poster reassures them. It tells them they are patriots. They are soldiers in a different kind of uniform. Claude R. Wicker, the Secretary of Agriculture, often used this kind of language, referring to food as a weapon and to farmers as soldiers of the soil. This propaganda also had a message for the rest of the country. It was meant to make urban Americans appreciate the importance of farming and the sacrifices that farm families were making. It was a call for national unity, bridging the gap between the rural and urban worlds. It shows how propaganda can be used to define and celebrate different roles within a national effort. But how did this farmer as soldier rhetoric affect agricultural policy? Did it lead to more government support for farmers, or was it used to demand more from them without providing adequate resources? And what was the long-term impact on the identity of American farmers? Did this period create a lasting image of the farmer as a patriotic hero that still influences our culture today? Number 3, did the government not trust the police? This is a fascinating and rarely seen American poster. It shows a city street scene. In the foreground, a civilian is pointing out a man to a U.S. Army military policeman. The man being pointed out looks shifty. The text says, "This man is a saboteur. Report all suspicious persons to your local military police." The strange thing about this poster is who it tells you to report to. It doesn't say the FBI. It doesn't say the local police. It says the military police. This poster hints at a deep-seated anxiety within the U.S. government about internal security. It suggests a lack of trust in the existing civilian law enforcement agencies to handle the threat of sabotage and espionage. During the war, the military took on a much larger role in domestic affairs. The country was divided into defense commands. The military was responsible for things like coastal defense and anti-aircraft installations. This poster seems to extend that authority into the realm of internal security. The fear of sabotage was very real. In 1942, a group of trained saboteurs from an enemy power landed on the coasts of Long Island and Florida with plans to blow up American factories and railroads. They were caught by the FBI, but the incident caused a major panic. The government wanted to create a system where every citizen was a lookout. This poster is part of that effort. It's telling people to be vigilant, to watch their neighbors, to look for anything out of the ordinary. But the instruction to report to the military rather than the police is unusual. It suggests that the threat was considered a military matter, not a criminal one. It blurs the line between civilian and military jurisdiction. This poster raises some serious questions about the balance of power between civilian and military authorities during a time of war. What was the legal basis for the military police to investigate and detain civilians? We know that after the Pearl Harbor attack, the military was given the authority to intern Japanese Americans on the West Coast, a decision that is now widely condemned. Was this poster part of a broader and perhaps unconstitutional expansion of military power on the home front? How did local police departments feel about these posters? Did they see it as a challenge to their authority? It's a small detail in a single poster, but it opens a window into the complex and sometimes tense relationships between different branches of the government during a national emergency. Number 2, were you allowed to have fun? This British poster is a simple text-based design. It has a question in large friendly letters. Is your journey really necessary? It's a variation on the American Railroad poster, but the context is different. This was a general purpose slogan used across all forms of transport in Britain, from trains to buses. It wasn't just about clearing the tracks for military supplies. It was about discouraging almost all non-essential movement of people. The British transport system was under even more strain than the American one. The country was small and densely populated. The railways were constantly being targeted by enemy bombing. Coal, which powered the trains, was in short supply. The government had to prioritize essential travel troops, war workers, and goods. Everything else was a luxury the nation could not afford. The Ministry of War Transport, led by Lord Leathers, was responsible for this massive logistical challenge. The poster's slogan became one of the most famous catchphrases of the war in Britain. It was a constant reminder to question your own actions. Do you really need to visit that relative? Do you really need to take that holiday? The answer was almost always no. The campaign was deliberately killjoy. It was an attack on the very idea of leisure and pleasure. The government actively discouraged holidays. They ran posters with slogans like, "Holidays at home are happiest." They wanted people to stay in their own towns, to work in their gardens, to save fuel, and to keep the transport systems free. This was a key part of the total war ethos. The nation was a single machine geared for one purpose. There was no room for frivolous individual desires. This poster is a perfect example of propaganda that works by fostering a sense of collective self-denial. It's not about doing something heroic. It's about not doing something. It's about the patriotism of staying put. It asks people to sacrifice their personal freedom of movement for the greater good. This had a profound effect on the social life of the country. People's worlds shrank. They became more focused on their immediate local community. But what was the psychological effect of this constant pressure to suppress personal desires? Did it lead to a sense of resentment, or did it genuinely foster a stronger sense of national unity? And when the war was over, was there a massive pent-up demand for travel and leisure that exploded in the post-war years? Number one, what if the enemy looked just like you? This American poster is perhaps one of the most disturbing and insidious. It shows a group of ordinary Americans chatting and gossiping. A man is telling a story to his friends. A woman is on the phone. They look like your neighbors, but intertwined with their conversations are ghostly, demonic figures representing the enemy. The text reads, "He's watching you." It's not about a spy in a trench coat. It's about the enemy in your own head, the enemy that is your own carelessness, your own desire to gossip. This poster, created for the U.S. Army, is the ultimate expression of the careless talk theme. It internalizes the threat completely. The enemy is not an external force that you can fight. It is a part of you. It is a weakness in your own character. The poster suggests that the enemy is listening to every conversation everywhere. It creates a sense of pervasive, inescapable surveillance. The figures are drawn in a sinister, racist, caricature style, but their power comes from their association with the ordinary Americans in the picture. The message is that your normal, everyday social interactions are a danger to the nation. This is the end point of the propaganda of suspicion. It starts by telling you to watch out for spies. Then it tells you to watch what you say. Then it tells you to watch your neighbors. Finally, it tells you to watch yourself. It asks you to become your own censor, your own policeman. The psychologist Jacques Ellul, in his book Propaganda, the Formation of Men's Attitudes, argued that the most effective propaganda is not the kind that tells you what to think, but the kind that creates a whole mental universe, a set of assumptions and anxieties that you are not even aware of. This poster is a powerful tool for creating that kind of mental universe. It's a world where every word is potentially a weapon and every citizen is a potential traitor. This poster represents the immense psychological pressure that governments placed on their citizens during the war. They were asked not only to sacrifice their material comfort, but also their mental and social freedom. They were encouraged to be suspicious, to be fearful, and to constantly police their own thoughts and words. It was a necessary part of mobilizing the nation for a total war, but it came at a cost. What are the long-term consequences of teaching an entire generation to be suspicious of their own words and of each other? Did this wartime culture of secrecy and self-censorship have an afterlife, influencing the political and social climate of the Cold War that followed? And when the enemy is no longer a foreign power, but a potential weakness inside every citizen, does the war ever truly end?